and Happy New Year to everybody. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, January 3rd, Ann Arbor Development Authority Board meeting. Susan, would you like to call the roll?
Sure. Saba Farah, Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Marie Clough.
Here.
Howard Lazarus.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Darren McKinnon.
Present.
Al McWilliams. John Mowat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr. John Split. Bill Weiss.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Good. First item on our agenda this afternoon is public hearing on the proposed parking rate changes. We're going to invite the public to speak. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. But before we do that, I'd like to invite Susan to stay at the podium and maybe do a little bit of an introduction and frame this discussion for us. Susan, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we've put out, as broadly as we could, a set of rate changes that are under consideration. I'd like to begin by noting that nearly every cost that's associated with the public parking system is paid for by the patrons who use it. This includes revenues from the meters, from the lots and the structures. What the revenues are put to are the costs for operating the garages, operating the lots. They pay for repairs, they pay for ongoing maintenance, they pay for the debt service, for almost all the debt service in the system. And in addition to which, an important and increasingly important part of this is 20% of parking revenues are provided to the city as a source of revenues to provide services to us as community members. There are a few reasons why rates get changed. One of the good reasons is it continually costs more to operate the parking system despite Republic's efforts to contain costs. The costs for things like healthcare and so forth continue to grow. Plus, we're making enhancements to the public parking system with the goal of improving customer experience. So for instance, this has included doubling the number of e-park machines, which has made it more convenient to use a credit card at the meters on street. We added a new stair and elevator to the old Fort William garage. You can experience what the old stair and elevator looks like because the ones at the north end of the garage are still there. This made it far more comfortable to be in that garage. The lobby area itself was also improved. The DDA improved its use of technology with the ePark app, which is increasing in use in the parking system. And we're currently exploring the expansion of the Ann and Ashley garage as a tool in the toolbox to encourage the redevelopment of the western part of our district. These are parking spaces that we hope will be used by future residents and employees and customers in that part of the downtown. We also use parking rates as part of our demand management strategy. Somewhat like the airport, you use rates to encourage people to maybe park a little further away, walk a little bit. The rates are intended to be done in a strategic way, which now leads to the part about the current proposal with the rates. In the past, rates were changed more sporadically. The first part of what's being proposed is that over the next several years, there would be a rate change, and that's part of what you see, what the community has seen as proposed rates. So it's not going to come as a surprise. Somewhat like having an office or an apartment, your rent changes generally at annual points. The garages currently have hourly rates at $1.20. The last time this was changed was in 2012. Much of what's been proposed uses that as a baseline. That will remain unchanged. Again, $1.20 in the garages for the last 5 years will remain the same for the next 5 years. What is being proposed is the monthly permit rates will continue to go up, though, over the next few years. The gradual effect is that the cost of parking the garage with permits and the cost of parking the garages by the hour will grow increasingly the same. We've heard repeatedly one of the great demands for permits and why the permit wait list is so long is that many people know that they can save a good deal of money paying by permit, even if they aren't using their permit every day. And so gradually changing the permit rate will make that hourly rate increasingly attractive. So many more people will be using that easy card, which allows you all the benefits of a permit, but without actually having prepaid in a monthly permit way. You're prepaying with an easy card when the rates are so similar. We will also keep the rates steady, which will make it more attractive when we're looking at on-street gradually increasing the amount to pay on-street, again, makes off-street seem a little bit more attractive. For those that want to park on-street, we're very grateful that you're there. But for those for whom price is a little bit more of a sensitivity, they may consider to park off-street. They may find it a little bit more attractive to walk a little further. The goal of this is to present it as a strategy. Today's public hearing is a chance to hear from the public, to hear if the strategy makes sense or the specific rates make sense. The last time these rates were changed was in 2015. That was about two and a half years ago. Separate from this, we've also given a set of ideas to the city to consider for strategically modifying parking fines. For instance, ideas that were shared at a work session included asking the city to possibly explore using technology, first-time forgiveness for parking tickets for those visitors who come in, may not know all the rules, to explore ideas also about changing the fine amounts when on-street rates change, letting that be a reason for the city council to explore whether they want to change their fine amounts and having the two more in choreography together. So today, though, we're not talking about fines, we're just talking about the cost to park and the rates to park. And if there are any questions, certainly I'll be available to answer them.
At this time, thank you, Susan. We'd like to open it up for any member of the public who would like to discuss concerns or ask questions about the proposed parking rate changes. Again, you have 3 minutes at the podium. If anybody would like to step forward, please do so now. Yeah?
Does that include asking questions?
Sure, come on up.
Okay.
What's your name?
Fleming Green. My main questions are, have there been any studies done to see how changing the parking rates will potentially impact businesses? I know Plymouth has free parking for the first 2 hours, and that makes it attractive to go down to Plymouth when you don't have to pay for parking. Having both my regular cafe and workout center and everything in the downtown area, I would seriously reconsider changing gyms or finding a new place outside of the downtown district if the parking rates went up. Because I'm looking at, if I'm at the gym for an hour, then all of a sudden I'm adding $4.40 to my already per class cost of attending. That latte no longer costs $4, it costs $6. So I was wondering if there have been any studies done to see how it could potentially impact businesses. And also looking at sister cities. If Boulder, which I think is pretty similar in terms of size, university town, decent walking area, their parking rate is $1.85 an hour. Chicago's typical parking rates are $2 an hour, and New York City, north of 96th Street is $1.50, south of 96 is $3.50. So to have parking rates that exceed Chicago without a lot of the added benefits seems like there's a bit of disparity there. So I was wondering if there have been comparisons to other cities and forecasts as to how it could potentially impact businesses in the area.
You want to show you?
No, there's no.
Oh.
Welcome the next person.
Anyone else interested in speaking on the proposed parking changes? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the board meeting agenda, please.
So moved.
Joan, thank you.
Second.
Marie, thank you. All those in favor of the approval of the board December board meeting agenda, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Thank you. Item number.
Except it's January.
It is the January. Thank you.
Little correction.
A little bit. Next item on the agenda is audience participation, and for this we allow 4 minutes. Anything that's any member of the audience would like to discuss with the DDA board, please step forward. I know we had one person sign up, Ali Ramwali. 4 minutes.
Hello, Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Ali Ramlawi, owner of Jerusalem Garden, resident of the 5th Ward. Been up here a few times. Going to try to be constructive rather than criticize this time around as much. My main concern is when I look at the numbers that are going to be generated over 4 years of this up to 40% increase on these street parking meters, is what's going to happen to the $3 or $4 million that are going to be raised. Are they going to be spent to help those local small businesses that have been the ones targeted by this move that we're motivated to help the turnover on the streets. You know, so if we're serious about helping small local independent businesses, I hope some of that money goes back into really helping local small independent businesses. I think we should be exploring something of a tax abatement zone for businesses that do under $1 million a year, where we promote businesses that do not sell food or alcohol, but other things, and kind of like an incubator of sorts. We can take some of this money that's being generated and help fund some sort of system that helps incubate small local independent businesses that have been gutted by Amazon and the likes. So that is one thing. Another thing is the metered bags. I noticed the price on those metered bags don't change. Even out 4 years out from now, they're only at $25. And I just know, speaking to other small business owners, that's a big problem for small businesses. And we have a classic example of it right now on 4th Ave. The Montgomery building's been under construction now for like a year. It doesn't look like it's going to get done before 2025 at this rate. But yet you have a lot of the little we have left on 4th Avenue in terms of local businesses that are suffering from that. So I really do think some people are taking advantage of the cheap rates on those metered bags. And if they're going to be for long-term leases, I mean, I don't know how long the limit is on those, but the price of those should be escalated. The cost that they are harming the local businesses is pretty severe, and I really think the policy on that needs to be looked at. I think the rates are very competitive for the garages, but like the previous speaker just spoke, raising the on-street parking to levels above $2 seems a bit aggressive. You know, I think once you get to about $2 an hour, it starts to really become a psychological thing. Perhaps you can look at other ways in the system to raise revenue, but I think at $2, at 2020, I think the year is, they could hit $2. I think there should be a freeze. I think at that point we should probably take a look at what the situation's like. We might be in an economic depression, recession, could still be booming. But right now we're over 100 months into this bull market. Who knows how long it's going to last. So, you know, again, and there's also this philosophy right now going on in downtown and city council, and you're affected as well, as about the development downtown and trying to promote people to walk and bike and not use cars. And I'm just questioning here the strategy of the garages staying at such a low rate at $1.20 an hour, where the permits really don't go up that much. Does that really promote people to use cars less? Because it seems like you're going to abuse that. If I'm paying a couple $100 for a whole month, 90-day, you know, guaranteed parking, I don't know if that's really consistent with the philosophies that we're following right now. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we had anyone else sign up for audience participation, correct? I don't believe so. Okay. Item number 5 on the agenda, reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter, you're up. 4 minutes, sir.
Last night, as an introduction to what was really a full agenda, CAC members and guests discussed our position on several important parking policies. Some of the conclusions that we drew in a very fast-moving sort of discussion. Current rates are not excessive and should continue to be adjusted upward to meet the required needs of a well-run system. Parking fines should be coordinated with rising parking rates so that getting a ticket is not an easy means of ignoring the system. If there is a good means of identifying patrons, we should forgive first ticket violations and raise fines on repeated offenders. Also, last night, we seemed, let's see, I lost my place here. We seemed almost unanimous in supporting extending our metered hours from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. This should be combined with continued experimentation with providing downtown workers with free or freer evening parking spaces in less used portions of downtown parking structures. Most of our meeting was then devoted to consideration of parking, traffic, residential, and transportation issues in downtown nearby neighborhoods. Parking, traffic, residential, all of these sorts of things that we're very much committed to in terms of handling them wisely in the area of the downtown are not only in the area of the downtown itself, but more recently in nearby neighborhoods that affect the downtown. So last night we discussed 1144 Broadway, which you all know passed this last month, and the attempt really to reconsider the Brownfield plan more recently with regard to turning back on that, and of course that was rejected. Vote which I think was 4-7 on that. So that was not held back. But Broadway fits into a whole concept with regard to the nature of traffic and also parking. There we need a situation on Broadway, which is a better system of having a parking permit system in the neighborhoods in order to handle their parking issues. But we also know that right there at 1144 Broadway, right across the street between Wall Street and also Maiden Lane, the university at this particular point is committed to doing a parking structure. 1,000 cars are going to go into that parking structure right across the street from Kellogg, but right also across the street from the new development, which is going to take place over there for the next 3 years. Now that is bound to affect the whole nature of traffic flow throughout the area of not just lower town, but also downtown in terms of coming in off of Main Street and going out in the evening off of Main Street as well. But also at the same time, one has to recognize that that parking lot or parking structure that the University of Michigan is planning on building is being built to replace the temporary loss of the parking over on Fuller, with the assumption really that Fuller eventually is going to be built. So that also has to be taken into consideration. There's going to be a long period of time where that's being built, and the whole nature of these coming together with that project and also the new parking structure and perhaps the depot, whether it's on Depot Street or Fuller Road, are things that we have to take into consideration in terms of downtown development. I don't have enough time to get into it, but we also last night discussed the Glen and its impact upon downtown. Also, the proposal at this particular point with regard to the possibility of adding a floor to the what was formerly the Campus Inn on Huron Street, and what that does to Huron traffic if that actually emerges. A number of other issues that are all interrelated with regard to this whole issue of parking, transportation, and movement, throughout the downtown and into nearby neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Moving along, item number 6. Do we have any communications from DDA members? Hearing none, we'll go to item number 7. Susan, Executive Director, Communications, please.
So just 2 brief things. The first is I added to your packet at your table something I received late yesterday, which is the Ann Arbor Public Art Commission has been tasked by the city to look at the CIP and determine which projects they think public art might be appropriate. And some of our projects have been tapped, so I just wanted to let you know that I'll be bringing to committee the question about how and where public art might find its way into the expansion at Ann and Ashley. And also they've tapped the Huron Street project and the First and Ashley project. So just to let you know, we've just started a conversation with the Arts Commission. As I know more, again, we'll bring it through committee. And then the second thing was this morning, very kindly our chair shared with me the Swisher vacancy report. They very kindly share that with us every year, so I'm sure I'll be getting my copy later. But what was interesting about it is overall the market vacancy throughout Ann Arbor is decreased from 8.7% to 7.2%. But where it relates to downtown is that our vacancy has nudged upwards just a little bit from 2.1% to a slightly higher 3.6%. And I think Darren and others probably could explain what that is and why. The piece, though, that notes us is that a lot of downtown companies are expecting to hire more employees, but the DDA attractiveness for growing businesses and new tenants alike will be influenced by the availability of public parking. While alternative transportation is becoming more popular, Swisher says cars are still the norm, leading many businesses to hesitate renting office space if they're unable to secure parking for their employees. So just to put it on our radar, this is part of the ongoing community conversation around parking. How much is enough? What does it look like? But just again, it's called out in this year's annual report. If anybody would like a copy, I'm sure Swisher wouldn't mind my sharing it with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Now I would like to have a motion to approve the December meeting minutes.
Oh, the December meeting, so moved.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Marie. All those in favor of approving the December meeting minutes say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. Capital Improvements Committee, Mr. Moad.
Great, thank you. So we talked about a few of the projects. The first one, Huron Street. We've pushed our staff and our consultants pretty hard on Huron Street about looking at options, and included whether we could reduce the number of lanes and various aspects of it. But some of the goals of the project from the beginning included enhancing the ability to have larger trees, to be able to improve pedestrian safety, to try to do something to help with stormwater, how to help with transit along that corridor, various goals for the project. And so, going through a fairly rigorous process of looking at how traffic flows, and the bottom line is Huron Street's primary function is to move cars at this point. And it was found that it really was not realistic to reduce the number of lanes, unfortunately. But they did show some images of how things could look and how it could be kind of more of a featured boulevard. And well, I should be careful to say boulevard. I guess one thing I would comment on is that the design showed the ability to put a couple of islands along there that could potentially have trees, but we all had concerns about the maintenance and how those things would work. But I think that the point I would kind of throw out is that I think with what folks are envisioning at this point, it could greatly enhance the impact of Huron Street as being the sort of main gateway into the community. And that, I think, was one of the biggest single goals of the project, along with the ability to connect to Carytown, downtown. So those are two pretty big goals. And I think those get preserved. There's some detail things, such as potentially having left turn lights at 5th to enhance safety and movement of vehicles and so forth, which I think could be quite a good enhancement. So bottom line is the committee approved to move forward with the design, sort of based on what they presented, and so that project's moving along.
It was great because we were stuck in the mud in November. Was that an apt description, Amber? But Amber forced us to stay on task to vote at the December meeting. It was good.
Yep, that was good. 5th in Detroit, as you folks may know, is out to bid. So January 11th is D-Day. The price is coming in. And one thing to make sure everyone understands and is aware of is the fact that for this project, as opposed to Southview, for this project, the city will sort of be the lead on it, on dealing with the contracts and so forth, and we will be involved in a kind of working through the cost-sharing agreement a little bit with them on how that piece looks. So that's how that one will be structured, and we'll see once the numbers come in how that's all looking to everyone. And there'll be some conversation. Hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have some what we all hope to be good news and look to move forward with that. The other thing at the next meeting will be the kickoff for the first Ashley and William Street project. The folks from Tool Design Group, which are I guess I'd call them the sub-consultants to Smith Group JGR, or the sort of specialists in these kind of unique projects, will be flying into town and to get that off to a good start. So I'd encourage folks to come to that meeting if you are able to. And that meeting will be January 24th at 11 a.m. Any questions for me as staff? Great, thank you.
Thanks, John. Who's pinch hitting on the operations committee?
I'll take it.
Susan?
Both coaches, you have 2 chairs. You think you have a 50-50 chance, but unfortunately they're both away. First thing to note in your packet is the monthly parking and transportation report. Items of note that you might find interesting include we're moving forward with the rest of the structure fencing As you've heard, we had established a $400,000 budget for rooftop fencing, which would include the cost as well as costs for Republic to up staff so we have 24-hour coverage. Future Fence was able to get the rooftop fencing done very quickly. We thank them very much for being so responsive. And that meant that the costs for staffing weren't as great as we thought. So we put out to bid fencing for the garages on now the lower levels. We're going to see what those numbers look like for, say, a level, the second to the top, and one after that on all of the garages that are above ground. So that's moving forward. Since the last meeting, when the board approved a contract with Nova, we met with them to talk about our pilot's solar project at 4th and Catherine. I think we came to a really good detailed understanding, and so they'll be moving to fabricate what will be the car shed under which the cars will sit, on top of which the solar panels will be installed. So that's moving forward. And since we've approved the Anna Ashley expansion, and last month we shared the scope, we've begun some initial conversations with city staff, trying to understand, how we'll do things like respond to stormwater and all sorts of other things. This is a 1987 garage, how we might proceed to add those floors and the process that will follow. So as that becomes more clear, we'll bring that back through the operations committee. And I think those are kind of the items of note. Just if there's any questions about operations, I'd be happy to pitch it for John and Keith. Thank you.
Next committee meeting on the 31st of January at 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Finance Committee, Maureen?
So the Finance Committee did not meet in December. And given the weirdness of the dates in January, the next Finance Committee will be Thursday, February 1st at 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Partnerships, Joan?
Our committee actually did meet in December. Most of the meeting was about a presentation on the city sign ordinance, which was interesting because it was something that was not on our radar necessarily. So the city planner, Chris Cheng, and city consultants from Giffel Webster gave an overview of the project that's examining potential changes to the sign ordinance. And the Ann Arbor sign ordinance hasn't been changed in many years, and there's a perception that we really need to change things given digital media, digital signs, and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that it's interesting for the public to note is that there's an online public feedback forum called Picture This that you can access through the city's website, and it allows you to go in and look at various signs and say, oh yeah, I like this one, I don't like this one. Do you like signs on awnings? Do you like, I mention awnings because those are Susan's favorite. But it's really good, and it's kind of, this is the new age of getting a lot of public feedback. It's easy to do, and they've asked for our feedback, and so I encourage board members to go onto this, Picture This on the city's website and do the survey. Very interesting, and if you've never thought about signs before, this is an opportunity to start thinking about it. Yeah.
What's the timeline of them making the changes?
It's like a whole year. There's plenty of, they're not anticipating that the ordinance will actually be changed until a year from now. So they're working really hard to get feedback from the public and of course from the people who actually post signs. We also talked about housing affordability. Susan shared statistics from a recent Ann Arbor news story noting the number of students at U of M continues to grow and is now greater than 46,000. Although there are many positives to this, she noted that this is a contributor to our ongoing issues of housing affordability. Because that many students skews the need for various kinds of housing, and many of them can afford expensive housing, and so that seems to be what's getting built. We talked a little bit about event security precautions. There are concerns from event organizers regarding the growing cost and complexity of providing security for downtown events. We had a good discussion about this. The consensus was that the best role for the DDA would be to facilitate a discussion about the topic with the interested parties, including the police, downtown merchant associations, and other downtown special event planners. At one time, we had talked about whether it was possible that there were infrastructure changes that DDA could facilitate. I just heard very briefly on the radio, I think this morning, about in New York around Times Square, where they're going to be installing metal bollards, and I want to take a look at that and see kind of what they're doing, and whether it's, we talked a little bit about it in our discussion, that certainly in Ann Arbor, we're not going to go into putting any kind of massive fold down security metal barriers and that kind of thing. But there might be some new ideas that we can do. And certainly what we want to do is make sure that smaller groups can continue to hold events without being stymied by requirements that may or may not be what are the best practices. And our next meeting is next week on the 10th, Wednesday the 10th at 9 a.m.
All right, thank you, Joan. The executive committee met this morning. We reviewed today's agenda. We reviewed the public art enhancement recommendations that Susan talked about. We reviewed some of the emails that were received in response to the proposed parking rate changes. That was about it. The executive committee will meet again at 11 a.m. on February the 7th, right before the board meeting. Any new business from any DDA board member? Hearing none. We have a second round of audience participation. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the board? If so, please step up to the podium and you'll have 4 minutes to speak.
Mind if I? Short meeting, I want to make sure. Just a couple quick points to recent comments that were made. And it's going to be debated for a long time. But the whole affordability issue in Ann Arbor right now is very complicated. And I just think we should be very cautious at blaming or assigning, there's some correlations, obviously, rising number of college students is one issue, but I think that's one that's, in my opinion, overplayed. So just one thing, I just really would like to be cautious of that, because a lot of people will blame U of M for a lot of our issues, and some of them are true, and I think some of them are overplayed. And I think that is one that we should really be cautious of. Enrollment is going up, but there are many other factors that are leading the unaffordability index in Ann Arbor, and that's, in my opinion, not the biggest driving force. And I'll leave it at that. Other things is like we just talked about security measures, having things, in a way in downtown, and it's always been a case where there hasn't been public. I mean, I'm not up here to promote like Alan Haber's group's idea of having a civic center there, but we really need to look at having an area in downtown where we don't have to close off the streets as often we do. I mean, to be honest with you, love it. The pipe fitters come in every August. It's great. But they close down the roads. I mean, I think this year they had like a marathon no one knew about. They had this 5 mile, I think it was that organization, but they had like a 5K or something. The next thing you know, like, all these roads are closed, and like employees can't come to work, and your customers are calling you, can't pick up their orders. And we need to have a long-term discussion on where in downtown we can actually have these events, whether it's the Mayor's Green Fair, whether it's festivals, whether it's some of the other things that we'd like to do downtown. But closing down Main Street and closing down these streets as often as they get shut down is a big problem. I mean, there's commuters, there's businesses that needs to be conducted, and we really should try to find an area where we can hold these kind of events, and it'd be better off, and it sounds like it might be even cheaper, than trying to logistically close off big sections of downtown for events. We want to be welcoming, we want to be friendly, we want to be accommodating. We also need to be practical and pragmatic, and I just think there's there's some issues there and it can definitely be played better. So thanks for letting me talk again.
Thank you. Any other audience participation this afternoon? Hearing none. Hearing a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bob, thank you.
Darren, second.
Darren, second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.